I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but I'm basically in tears. There she is, man. I haven't seen her for years and years and years. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York, in the 1980s. I was born in 1971. So in the 1980s, I was a middle school, high school kid, and I just saw this movie one day, Smokey and the Bandit, like everybody did at that age, and absolutely fell in love with the car. Fell in love with that black Trans Am. I was about 16 years old, I guess, maybe 17 years old, and I had to have one. And where I grew up in Williamsville, New York, just outside Buffalo, there's a lot of car people. Everybody had an IROC Z28 or a Mustang GT or a Trans Am or a Firebird or some kind of car. So I had the one in sights that I wanted. I wanted this Trans Am. I worked for 2 summers, constantly bagging groceries, caddying at the local golf club, and saved up as much money as I could. I couldn't get a new one, but I wanted a 77, 78, roughly something like that, Trans Am. I found one. I found one on Auto Trader back in the day when we would look through the Auto Trader in the magazine and in the, like kind of the newspaper. I found one in Rochester, New York. And at the time, my high school sweetheart, her brother and her father were big car guys. They built cars. They had a lift in their garage, and they would paint cars, and muscle cars were all around us. So I took him with me to Rochester. I had him look at the car, and he checked it out, and he said, "Man, it's great. You should get it." So I bought it. I'm driving back from Rochester in the middle of winter. This was a 1979 Trans Am. It was a 4-speed with a 400 cubic inch engine in it. I didn't know I was getting a Y84 special edition Trans Am, one of only 1,000 and some made. I just wanted a black Trans Am with the bird on the hood, and I definitely wanted a stick shift. So I drive it home, and here I am in high school now with this Trans Am, and it was my identity. It was, if you saw that Trans Am, you knew Joe was coming down the street. Everybody knew everybody. We would race these cars. We would drag race them. We would wash them. We would work on them with our fathers and our family members. Spark plugs, little things, catalytic converters, oil changes. So this car was my dream car. I loved it. I was in it every single day and took pictures and videos with it and just drove it all through high school. I'm a musician for a living. I play the trumpet. And when it was time to go to college, I did a couple years at college. I brought the car with me, and then I left college and went on the road for an entire year with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, playing my horn and traveling all over the world. It was a great experience. But when I came back, my father was transferred to Atlanta, Georgia. So now I had to make the decision whether to move to Atlanta or finish college outside of Buffalo. So I moved to Georgia, and I get to Atlanta, Georgia, Roswell, Georgia, and everything is further away. Driving down to Georgia State University was an hour plus. It was very expensive to go to school here as opposed to the school in Buffalo where I went to. So it was time to get a different car, and it broke my heart. I had to sell this Trans Am. I had to get I forget even what I got, like a Corolla or something with some good gas mileage. And I struggled with this decision for months and months. And finally, I said, all right, I'm going to let it go. So I sell the car, 1993. I sell the Trans Am. I watch the guy drive away with it. I'm in tears. I can't believe I got rid of that car, but okay, here's the new phase of my life. So now I miss this car all the time, constantly. I still watch the movie. I still look at pictures of me with the car from years earlier, and I'm just kind of devastated. 1996 rolls around. I saved up a little money, and I went out and I bought a brand new 1996, I think it was 97 actually, red Trans Am with a 6-speed and an LT1 and T-tops and loaded, thinking that would kind of take care of the loss of the black 79 TA. And it was cool. It was a beautiful car. I drove that for many years and sold that when it was time. But it never really brought me back to that feeling I had with that other car. And throughout the years, I had like a Formula. I was a big Pontiac guy. A Formula 350. I had a couple other Firebirds. Nothing kind of made me happy like that Trans Am did. So I started to look for it. In the late 90s, the early 2000s, I had no VIN number. I had no recollection of the guy that I purchased it from. I didn't really dive in that deep. I don't even think I had a computer in those days, you know. So I just look in the basement for little information about the car. I would look online on my friend's computer to see if there was anything happening, like, you know, in the Trans Am world. But it was nothing I really delved into. This went on for years. I really wanted that car back, but I just didn't really know how to get it. So as time goes on, now I'm thinking, well, what if I buy black Trans Am. What if I just buy another one? Maybe that'll take care of this urge I have for this car and this driving experience. So I did. I don't know, 2013 or 14, I bought a black 1980 Trans Am that was rebuilt. It was originally a red Trans Am, but this guy turned it into a bandit car, did a wonderful job. I found it online and I bought it. It had a 400 in it. They delivered it to my house in Roswell, and I drove that car, and it was fantastic. It was a great experience, but I still didn't have that emotional connection to it. I'm sitting around one day with my son. He's about 8 or 9 or 10 years old at the time, and we're watching this show on Discovery. We just stumbled on it. It's called Trans Am, and it's these guys, Scott and Todd Warmack, that I think, and I hope I get this right, purchased the rights maybe to the Trans Am when Pontiac went under, or when Pontiac went out of business in the late 2000s, 2009 or something. So now they have these Trans Ams, and they have this shop where they take brand new Camaros and recondition and refit them to be these 1,000 horsepower, ridiculous Trans Ams. They're just insane. They're beautiful. Couldn't afford one of those. And on the other side, they have Scott Warmack, who takes these older cars and either resto mods them or makes them completely original, and they're just beautiful. So I'm watching this show, and they're working on a 77 or 78 Trans Am for a guy named Chuck Harkins. And they take this Trans Am and they make it into a supercar. But it still looks just like it did from the movie. But underneath was all this incredible new stuff that made it fast and safe and powerful. And I'm watching it with my son, and the episode ends, and I'm telling my son, I said, I had that car. I mean, a year or two later than that car, but I basically had that car. I've been searching for it. I've been looking for it. And my son says, Dad, you got to find it. I said, I'm trying. He goes, no, you got to find that car. We got to get that car back. And it hit me like, if you ever seen the movie Rocky II, and his wife, Adrian, is in a coma, and she wakes up and she says, win. And Stallone goes, win, yeah. And his trainer goes, what are we waiting for, right? And Rocky now is all into getting like in shape and winning this fight. It's kind of the same thing happened to me. My son wants me to find this car. And I said, man, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find this car. So my first thing to do was to call the Warmacks. And I got in touch with Scott, and I drove to, I think they're in Tallahassee. I drove to Tallahassee. I met with him. I saw his shop. I was absolutely in heaven. He made it very clear that without a VIN number, without any really vehicle history on the car, that I was probably not going to find that car. But he would help a little bit if he could, anything he could do. It was just a really cool experience. And he also said, I can also build you a car. If you'd like a car like the one we did on the show, we'll find you a Trans Am. And I said, yeah, I would like to do that, but I've kind of tried that on some level. And I'd really like to see if my car is still alive, if it still exists. So he connected me with Rick Dieters, who runs Trans Am Specialties of Florida, which is another top-end F-body Trans Am Firebird place, buy and sell, but also recondition and make these cars like perfect, right? So I call Rick. Rick spends an hour on the phone with me, asking me questions about the car. He just loves the whole idea of me trying to find this car. He also says, probably not going to find this thing. But he says, if you have a picture of the car, I'll put it on my website. We'll see what happens. And I had a lot of pictures of the car from the late 80s. I sent him a picture. He puts on his website. Mr. Granston is trying to find his 1979 Y84 404-speed Trans Am. He sold it in Roswell, Georgia. It was originally in New York. If anybody has any information or have seen this car, let us know, reach out to us. And 3, 4, 5 months go by. And then I get a call from Rick. The guy that bought it from me stumbled on that post. And he said, yeah, I remember that car. I bought that car from Joe. I remember driving up his driveway. I remember his father was there. That was the car I bought. So Rick calls me, connects me with this guy, Robert Bates, just a class act human being. And Robert's so excited that he remembers this car. We're connected now. He looks for a couple weeks in his parents' basement, and he finds an old VIN number. We tracked the car to 2002 in Alabama. Now remember, this is 16 or 17. 2002, it goes dark. It hadn't been registered since then. So now here I am, 6 months, just searching. What do I do? I called the police department. I called the DMV. Nobody could really kind of help me out with this. And I kind of basically said, I have to either let this go or I have to really try one more time really hard. So I just kind of randomly Googled private investigators, Atlanta, Georgia. And this first name that came up, I just called the number. And the guy answered the phone, and he sounded like he was right out of the Smokey and the Bandit movie. Very Southern accent, very, very animated person. And I said, look, I don't know if you can help me, but I want to try to find a car I had as a kid. He said, what kind of car is it? I said, it was a 79 black Trans Am, kind of looked like the Smokey and the Bandit car. He said, hell yeah, I'll find that car. He said, man, I had one of them too. So I gave him the VIN, I gave him whatever information I had, and 4 or 5 months later he called and he said, got it. And he found it. He found it under a tree in the hills in Alabama. I go pick him up, I bring a bucket full of cash, and we drive up there. And it takes 4 or 5 hours. It was way up in the hills. We're coming from Atlanta, Georgia. The whole way I'm nervous. I'm almost in tears. Is it really going to be my car? He says, it's definitely your car. It's the same VIN number. We get there, and it's way in the back of the property. It's all fenced in. German shepherds running around. I'm not going to go in the fence. I'm knocking on the door. Nobody's coming to the door. And in the way in the back, I can see the front end, that special clip from the 79 Trans Am. And I'm like, oh my God, is that my car? And I walk around the fence. I'm going down the fence line, and I get to the car. And the first thing I see is this big buff mark on the right front fender that I put on the car in 1988. I just held the buffer there too long, almost winking at me. And I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but I'm basically in tears. There she is, man. I haven't seen her for years and years and years. It was very difficult. Nobody was home. The neighbor came over. The neighbor basically said, they're not around, but his sister lives up the hill. I'll give you her address. You can go up there. So I did. We drove up this hill to this little area where there was all these like kind of trailer park homes and close together and lots of dogs and it was just, it wasn't a very comfortable experience for me, but I had to find out, if I was going to be able to buy this car back. So I go up to the door, I knock on the door, she answers. She's about my age, I guess, and I tell her who I am and I'm looking for this car and I found it down there and I want to buy it back. And she says a couple things to me and I recognized her accent. And I said, you're not from here. She says, no. I said, where are you from? She said, upstate New York. I said, I'm from Buffalo. And so she was from like just outside of Rochester. So right away we knew all the same, we loved the Bills, we loved the Buffalo Sabres, we had a lot of things in common. So she said, come on, I'll show you the car. So she took me down there and we looked at it. And it had been sitting under a tree since 2002. I guess the guy that owned it now was the son of the gentleman that bought it from Robert. And I think he had passed away and left it to his son, and his son parked it in the back, and it just kind of sat there. It has T-tops, so the rain rotted out the floors. The car was a mess. I mean, it was there, but it was a mess. And I just basically said, look, I want the car. I don't care what it costs. You tell them to call me when they get home, and I want the car. Well, 8, 9 months later, I still don't have it. They don't want to sell it. They're not sure if they want to sell it. We couldn't come to an agreement. It was just heartbreaking for me, just let me have the car. Well, it's very emotional to us because it was my father's car, he's saying, and I'm saying, well, put it in the garage then, or put a cover on it, But anyway, they were cool. They didn't want to sell the car, and I was devastated. So I basically told my wife, I said, and my son, I have to try one more time, or I have to let it go, just like earlier. But this was for real because it was consuming all of my energy, all of my emotional. Just everything. It was just brutal. So I sent them a text and I said, look, I'd like to come back one more time. And if there's no rust, and if the car is in great, great, great condition, I'd like to give you, and I offered them a ton of money. I said, but if it's rusted out or if it's going to need a lot of work, then obviously I can't do that. And they said, come tomorrow. And I went, and I brought a car guy with me. And of course he got under it and it was ruined. There was no floors, barely. I mean, the car was shot. And so I nicely said, I can't give you that amount of money that I mentioned because the car is it's ruined. And we negotiated and we came to a price and they took it. And I put it on the flatbed and I drove it back to Atlanta and we parked it in my backyard. And I looked at it for a few days and cried and told stories and took pictures and sent it to all my friends back in Buffalo. And nobody could believe it. Oh my God, you have the car back. What are you going to do with it now? So I called Rick Dieters from Trans Am Specialties of Florida, and I said, if I send you this car that you helped me find, you're very instrumental in helping me find this car, would you rebuild it? He says, of course, if it's rebuildable. So we put it on a flatbed, sent it to Trans Am Specialties in Florida. COVID hits, so it sits there for a year or so, and he's working on it here and there, but he's got a lot on his plate like everybody in the country did, everybody in the world did, right? COVID finishes up as much as it can, and he's working on the car. He's sending me pictures. He's telling me, man, this thing is shot. This is going to take a long time. A lot of love and care is going to have to go into this thing. The engine was gone. The 400 Pontiac engine was gone. All the people in the Pontiac world and the car world said, look, since you're not a car guy, Joe, I don't know how to work on cars. They said, don't put another Pontiac engine in the car because it's not the original. It's not going to make the car have its original value. Put an LS2 or an LS3 or an LS1 in the car. It'll start up every time for you. So we did. We went with an LS2 out of a '06 GTO with a 6-speed manual transmission. And so he's building the car and he's sending me pictures. It's looking beautiful. Then he has a devastating fire in his shop and he loses 14 or 15 vintage Trans Ams. One of them, I think was either owned by Burt Reynolds or was used in the movie. Some connection with Burt Reynolds. Just heartbreaking to lose the car. Mine somehow survived. They pushed it out along with a bunch of other Trans Ams during the fire, and it survived. And another year or so went by, and it was finished. So I got it back probably in 18. I got it back right about March of 18. Yeah, it was gone for 25 years. That car was gone for 25 years. And a lot of people, friends that are not in the car industry and friends that are, all said the same thing. There's a good chance that thing was wrecked. I mean, we drove those cars hard. Everybody drove those cars hard. Mine was mine was in Buffalo, New York. We drove it in the winter with a 4-speed, 400 cubic inch engine with posi traction rear end. We slid that thing all over the road. We used to slide them around on purpose. So I was sure if it was even around, it was in a junkyard somewhere. When I got the car back, it was this past July of 24, when it actually physically showed up at my house and it was finished. And my son now is 14. So it was a handful of years between, Dad, go find that car, and wow, there it is. And he was almost in tears. This thing came to our house in a beautiful trailered truck with car stickers all over it. It looked like I was getting a NASCAR delivered to my house. Everybody in the neighborhood came outside. We filmed some of it. The guy starts this thing up and backs it out, and it's one of those things that there's beautiful cars all over the world, but car people know. If you love a car, if you love a certain style when you look at it, I'm just as excited now as I was as a 16, 17-year-old kid. I have it now. I have it in my garage. It's the love of my life. I bought one of those bubble, things you put in your garage. The car goes in there. My wife thinks I'm out of my mind, but I have my Trans Am that I pined for years and years and years. I never thought this thing was going to survive. And now I have it back. It'll stay in my family forever. My son will get it. It drives fantastically well. It's fast, much faster than it was when I had it. Although it was torquey and powerful for the 79, but I'm absolutely in heaven. I can't believe I have this car back. I just feel fulfilled.
This month of VINwiki Car Stories is brought to you by Bridgestone. We've talked a lot this year about the Potenza range of tires for sports cars and supercars, but what I'm personally most excited about right now is the Dueler AT Ascent. It is their latest and greatest tire for on-road and off-road capability. I've tried so many tires for my off-road kinds, but this really seems like it's going to be perfect. It's got full-depth interlocking 3D sipes and is their latest and greatest product, so it should give me all the off-road capability and wet and snow and everything else that I want to put it through, as well as much better road manners. So check them out as well as the whole range of Bridgestone products to find out what's perfect for your ride at the link in the description below, and look forward to more amazing content on VINwiki from Bridgestone.